Дуже дякую. І запрошую...
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Andy Coote, Director and the Chief Consultant of the independent consulting company, the United Kingdom. He will speak about investments in digital twins.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, we hear you. And
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it's okay.
So I'm going to speak very briefly on this because I understand we're behind time, but all of the very interesting things that we've seen in this earlier session around digital twins, around address management and so on, you can't do these things without money. And so I want to talk about how we as an industry actually look at a specific example, digital twins, and how we can put together the business case for investment in this type of work. So I'll just talk about setting some context, then we'll talk about some standard economic approaches, which I think we as an industry can adopt, some of the results and maybe the takeaways for adopting this kind of methodology. So why do we need to justify investment? Sorry, I'm getting feedback of myself, but let me press on. The 3D has become remarkably capable, as we've seen this morning, and for relatively lower costs than in the past. I think we're able to derive much more capable products. But this excites us, I think, as technologists. But if I'm a policymaker or a senior company executive, I need to be convinced that there is a return on investment. I can see the technology is attractive, but what's it going to mean for me as a big business or me as a government? And really, for justifying investment, we have to answer a few key questions. So what is the value proposition? What is the return on the investment that I make? Is it going to be positive? And is it going to be helpful both in social terms for citizens and also for economic assessment? Why does this project have to be done now? And how can I compare these benefits objectively with alternative investments? And will it deliver? What are the risks of failure? So we've developed a standardized approach, which is on the screen now, and you'll get these slides afterwards. So I'm going to just look at each of these in turn. The first one is we need to define the concepts and the scope of what we're talking about. Digital twin, I'm afraid, is a term that has domain-specific meanings. Geospatial, BIM, and the metaverse and gaming all define the term differently. So we need to be sure about we're speaking the same language, and it's one that can be interpreted by multiple different professions. We need to look at the specification. We've seen some level of detail, examples right through to floor plans of the internals of buildings, which is normally referred to as level of detail 4. And there's an increase in cost as you move from 1 towards 4. And are we talking about a mesh model, such as those we've seen today, or a digital surface model, or a digital terrain model? So once again, we have these things that concern terminology that we need to start off by defining. We need to look at different types of interoperability. I think most of us are happy with technical interoperability, but the semantic interoperability of what we mean when we describe things is an important factor. And the reasons for putting these up is that there are costs in doing the standards work that sits behind this. And there also, when we look at urban planning specifically, there are a number of different actors. There's obviously the government side, but there's then potentially much bigger gains for developers, for architects, and for citizens. So when we're doing the justification, we need to consider all of those. One of the other aspects that we need to look at is how we align with policy drivers. So how can we make our messages about why we need to do this fit with government policy or government or local city officials' agendas, and also with improving the lot of our citizens. So we need to look at those questions, and I'm not going to go through them in detail, but this alignment is an important stage in putting together the business case. Then we look at use cases. And as has been said, there are a number of different use case areas that I think we can consider, not only planning, and this is where the business case becomes easier if we then combine it with how this can help energy, transport, security, inward investment. So whereas we make the investments once, if we can put together a wide business case covering a lot of different application areas, then we have a better chance of being able to justify the investment. But let's look specifically at this area of planning. Some work I'm doing at the moment in the UK, we're looking at a series of different use cases, right from urban design strategies where 3D has a very positive role in being able to present things in ways that are easier to understand than 2D plans, particularly when you're looking at citizen engagement. We think in 3D, and therefore it's much easier to engage citizens in using a 3D model. Big scale regeneration, which of course is what is going to need to happen in Ukraine when hopefully the war comes to the end soon. These are ones where we have to consider a number of different perspectives, and that is much easier done if you can look at plans that are holistic in that they cover the whole of the city and they can be looked at from various different perspectives. Creating zoning plans, where are we going to put industry in the future and where residential. Consultations with other interested parties such as environmental consultants. Consideration of technical things like the right to light, shadow calculations. These are things that are very difficult to do unless you have a true 3D mesh model. But also decision making, the use of virtual reality by city officials. And there are some great examples, for instance, in Helsinki of how they've put this into practice. If we then look at the way in which major developments, so one of those particular use cases is implemented. This is an example from Nottingham City, where the developers send in a 3D model. It's then integrated with the overall city fabric, and then they can carry out their site assessment in a much more structured and cost-effective way. If we then look at how we then turn this into numbers, into financial values for presenting, one of the principal tools we have is what's called value chain modeling, where you draw out the processes that you're going to change. You look at where those processes become more efficient, where in fact processes may be removed completely, and where the value is therefore added can be pinned against those changed or removed processes. And this is carried out in consultation with the users. It's important to take the users with you in order to be able to produce a good business case, because they will articulate the benefits to politicians in a more coherent way and covering a wider set of uses than you're able to do as suppliers. And we look at these cost savings in terms of productivity, but also there are multiple other gains. There may actually be revenues that come to the city from being able to provide this data to developers and other interested parties. And we can validate monetary estimates these days by using examples, and there are an increasing number of examples of return on investment studies that have been done worldwide and can be applied to the situation in Ukraine. This is some work that we did for EuroSDR, which is the international body that looks at spatial data research. And this work, I've put a note in there of the URL. And this was looking purely at urban planning in Ireland using a reality mesh, and looking at only a couple of areas. So looking at reducing costs for developers and citizen benefits. And it gave a 2-to-1 return on investment. If we had looked at a wider range of different use cases, then that number would have gone up, because the costs essentially are fixed, but the benefits increase the more widely you use and share the data. So my takeaways from this are that socioeconomic benefit assessment is a prerequisite to securing finance, and certainly on the road to Ukraine joining the European Union, then I think that is even more important. There's an increasingly rich inventory of good use cases, and I've put a link to an inventory that we actually curate, which I think may help people to have a kickstart to producing these and have less fear of producing these return on investments. And if you use a repeatable standard approach, which will be the same for people making cases for investment in health or in other good calls upon money from governments, then you'll have a better chance of convincing those decision makers, because you're using the same kind of tools. Here are some of the further resources that you can take a look at, and I'm always willing to have discussions with people and help them along the road of doing this work to continue the very good work that you're doing. Thank you.